There we go. So we're going to have a panel, and for the panel, I'm going to invite these people. So if I could please ask Benny, John, and Reshma to take the stage here with me. So by the magic of technology, our mics should just automatically work. Let's see how that goes. Oh, yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for joining me, and welcome everybody to the panel. As I said, this is the first time we try to do a panel. Normally we have a Q&A at the end, but sometimes you got to switch it up a little bit. So before I get these guys to introduce, I just want to give a little bit of context on why we decided to do this and why we're having a panel and sort of having more of a senior panel discussion. For a while, so I have worked with design systems for quite a while through YLD and as a consultant, and met many different organizations and many different companies. And one thing that I've sort of really noticed is that I think that it's a fantastic how design system has been such a fantastic bridge between engineering and design. So on that note, how many people in here would consider themselves design people? Hands showing by hands. It's quite a lot of design people. Love that. How many people would consider themselves engineering people? You would have thought that is the other half. That's very true. You can be both. I love that even more. So how many people in here would consider themselves product people, such as product owners? Love that. So when I say product, before you get too excited, I'm talking about business analysis, product owners, product managers, that kind of leading the product. So can we get those hands up again so we see how many they are? There are a few, and a few kind of like maybe a little bit, but yeah. So the reason I ask this is because I think that engineering and design has got a great connection through design system. But I think for me, there is the third part missing, which is product. Because when we talk about success of design systems, we kind of have design working with engineering, producing something, and then saying to product, please make sure this happens. And sometimes I think it's on us as designers and engineers to ensure that we invite them to the conversation. It's a very long introduction saying, and that's what we want to talk about today. So I basically invited these lovely people to sit down and talk about this with me. So let's start by you guys introducing yourself. Let's start from you, Benny.
Hi, everyone. Is my mic working? Because I can't tell. I'm assuming it does. Cheers. No? I had both a no and a yes. So yeah, I'm Benny. Currently, I am Director of Product Design at Pearson Education. I've also had a love-hate relationship with design systems for many, many years. From like building one myself, which is where both my design, engineering, and product hand raise comes from, because I ended up having to do all three roles, because it was 2017. We were just starting with those things. I swore that I would never, ever, ever work on a design system again. And now I'm working on another one. So yeah, I'll pass to...
Hello, I'm Reshma. I'm the product manager for design systems at Sainsbury's. So I was in design discipline a while ago, and I've made it to the dark side. So now I'm the product manager here. So yeah, hello.
Mm-hmm. My name's John Reidy. I'm the director of our design system at T. Rowe Price. It's an American business, but we've got a base in the UK. I look after product design, and I'm also very involved in tech as well.
Brilliant. Okay, great. And I've already introduced my connection with design system. So today we are obviously not going to be able to cover everything, because when you set something like this up, you're very ambitious. But the couple of key areas that we have discussed previously that we want to talk about is bridging the gap, product management and design system integration, making the business case, measuring the value of design systems, which I know everyone's very keen on, and then organizational buy-in, embedding design system at scale. So let's start with kind of the product management design system integration. And I'm just going to throw a question out there straight away. And, the product people, don't get too upset when I say this. Why do product teams struggle to fully understand design system dependencies? Just going to right out there. I'm going to look at you first, Reshma, because as being the product representative here, what's your experience with this so far?
I think sometimes design systems can come across a bit too technical. it is a product after all mainly catering towards designers and developers. So while it kind of is related to product people in terms of how it helps them with the speed to market side of things, it can feel a little further removed. So while they have so many things to kind of like think about, this may be one step further back in terms of things they care about in order at the forefront of their mind. So it's not something that they are actively invested in trying to learn and understand about. Yeah.
Fair. I'm going to come back to that, but prioritizing where they sit. So as someone who's kind of worked a little bit across all of this, how do you sort of see that whole product understanding?
I think the main issue is that from the product perspective, more often than not, design systems are a dependency, not an enabler, which is the same thing, but it's two sides of the same coin, right? And as a dependency, it becomes something that they need to rely on for the success of their own roadmap, but they don't have control over. Also, even scarier, usually there isn't a product person in most design system team. Obviously, they're lucky here in Sainsbury's, but most other places they're not. So product doesn't even have a counterpart that they can speak the same language with and get reassurance over the roadmap. So to them, it can often look like there's a bunch of children doing a thing that they then have to like count on.
Excellent. So just to clarify, so what we want to talk about now, which is absolutely what you're hinting towards, is that product needs to be part of it. It's not necessarily about running your design system as a product. That's a different conversation that I also know you're all interested in. But yeah, so on that, John, please, what would you sort of add to that?
Yeah, I would say it's really interesting. I remember thinking a few months ago, I remember seeing a status sheet, a product owner status sheet, and it said dependency/risk. And there was design system. And I thought, that's always the same, that's like the same item.
The whole thing.
Dependency/risk is like a baked in, if it's a dependency, it's a risk. And I thought, wow, that's really key, isn't it? Anything that, and often I think in the world of Agile as well, it's like everything outside of our group is risky. We've got a team, we've got this really close-knit team, and if we now depend on these other complex systems, like you said, it puts everything at risk. And I love the kind of child-parent analogy. I think I was using that with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When it feels like, and I kind of run product for our design system, but sometimes product is like the grown-ups, and designers and devs feel like the kind of kids. Like they're doing all the cool stuff, and I think the parent-to-parent relationship between product owners is key. And we find it key as well.
So how do we then make that communication better? How do we kind of feel like product doesn't feel like it's a risk that they need to mitigate, or how do we actually invite product to be part of the conversation? You're talking, Reshma, hinting towards like it's too technical. What can we do as designers and engineers to ensure that they don't feel like that?
I think part of it is just kind of explaining the value of design systems in really simple terms that product people care about. So speed to market is what every product person cares about. It's like, can I get my stuff out faster with this? Oh, great, I want this. And also explaining it in terms of cost of delay as well. So if your feature was to go out 3 months later because you're not using design systems versus next month, that makes a big difference. That's how much more. So you're kind of connecting it more in terms of the revenues, basically bottom line revenue, but from all the metrics that they would normally care about. That usually helps quite a lot. But also the element of like, when do we get them involved? Being a product manager, it helps to go into product forums where roadmaps are being discussed and being able to say, oh, you're working on so-and-so experience, you'll need us for this part. Having that in very early on, so they factor that in, that helps. And then that gives us a bit of a heads up in terms of if a certain team is picking up a piece of work, what can we anticipate and how can we get ahead of the curve so they can actually go ahead and do it and everything is available. Still doesn't mitigate all of the issues. There will still be certain things, but I think that could be a good start point.
Excellent. So from your experience, kind of having been across the bill, is there anything, taking into consideration what Reshma just said, is there anything there that you would say, I wish I had done that in my past, or I would do things differently?
100%, but also there's an important component here in which I think that fundamentally at the end of the day you can educate product as much as possible, but having empathy for these poor product people, which I have a lot of because they are ultimately accountable for the success or the failure of the product. Like even when we speak about product trios, and that's engineering, design, and product, in reality, product is the one with the real ultimate accountability. So it's completely understandable that they will be very nervous about dependencies, especially dependencies that they don't understand very well. I have used, I'm not going to say wasted, a lot of time trying to explain to them directly why this is great, but what I found is that at the end of the day, they might even believe me, but they don't know how to justify then with their own superior, the people that they are accountable to, that they've had a delay because of a design system, or that they are dependent on this thing. So what I tend to do now, which I should have done a lot more in the past, is getting leadership buy-in.
Yeah.
Because if product leadership and engineering leadership buys into the importance of a design system, then it becomes okay. It becomes something that like everyone is aware of. It's out in the open. It's not a little secret that we're trying to make work. And then all of my product manager and product owners know that this is something that they have to use. They're encouraged to use, and everything is a lot more relaxed.
That's what we're going to get to, relaxed, whatever feels part of it. John?
Yeah, I think trust is a major factor, and I was thinking a lot of it's to do with how established your design system is within the community or within the business, because you could be at the beginning where you're really pushing, you're trying to get people to use it. You've got a small library, you're trying to get people to use it. But then you will get to a point of establishment when it's really strange not to use it. So product owners will feel really strange about not using the design system. So then they'll be asking you about, hey, we need to do this thing. Why isn't it in the design system? Or when is it part of the design system? And then your relationship completely changes. But I would say for everyone, it's trust. It's putting it in the hands of and if a product owner is going to trust they're going to trust their designers, they're going to trust their developers. And if they can use a component and they can see it working, and they start to trust that you will deliver on time, especially if they're really dependent on something like a trajectory of a component being live by a certain time that they need it, that's really when the trust happens, because they can't see it finished before they start. But I think it's building that trust and that brand.
So building that trust, I agree. I think that's very important. But I want to go back to sort of like when we introduce product. I think somebody mentioned that here, and I think that to me, is really key, because I think what often happens is that we can do all of this thing. We can build a trust. We can try to convince them why things are good, but I can't help feeling that we're not introducing them to the process early enough. By the time we do this, the design system already exists. It's already been signed off by business. It's already in flight. But how can we kind of make sure that rather than us trying to convince product, actually product is part of that conversation to when business agrees to design system? Because we all know that, that elusive business, someone is business leadership, like when they agree to it. Are we not having enough conversation with product already at that point?
Well, I have an opinion on that.
Go for it. That's why we're here.
Which is something that you might agree with because you lived it through with me. We're collaborating on a design system now for Pearson. And as you remember, we've really tried to integrate with everyone on day one. We had demos every other week, even of the scraps, and we were inviting product, we were inviting engineering leadership. I was advertising this to absolutely everyone, and I had actually managed to convince a few people who helped me put together the business case and then put budget towards it. So there was an intention of real collaboration from product from early on, and it was beautiful. And when it came to actual implementation and the part where they now need it for their own roadmap, they still freaked out because it's just what happens. So I believe it is important. It's incredibly important, but it's still one of the pieces. You still need the whole. You still need the leadership buy-in, and yeah.
So building on the leadership buying, we were talking about making the business case and kind of how can we go. So kind of what I'm hearing is that we have made a good effort of getting business on board of the buy-in, but in that buy-in process, we kind of forgot about products. Like I put my hands up and I say, I've seen this. I've seen where very few design systems from my experience, and some people might have other experience, they either initiated by design or by engineering. And so far, I haven't come across a single design system which is initiated by product. So how do we change that conversation with business? Or how do we kind of like get that business case going that makes it important for product people? As you say, like product people, they care about the deliveries, they care about the business. How do we get them to see that this is supposed to support them?
I think depending on the level of your stakeholder you're talking to, they may care about different aspects. So if you're talking about really senior leadership who are sponsoring the team, so to say, you are talking very monetary aspects. So you're trying to kind of figure out how do you kind of show them the return on investment on the team. And that's something that at Sainsbury's we've kind of calculated the value of a component based on like if you were to design a component from scratch, how much would it cost versus like if you were to use design system one, what it would cost. And that's kind of like, okay, for every experience you build, you're using these many components, this is how much it is going to be saving the company, because it's already, the bigger the adoption, the more return on investment, and that kind of pushes it further. Then there is this other side, which is like your immediate stakeholders who are the folks working on the ground. So this is where the product manager. And again, going back to that point around like faster. It's going to make things faster for you guys. And the cost of ownership is also not on you. There is design systems is actually maintaining it. So tomorrow you don't have to find out like a new accessibility bug in production. You know, these things, just kind of laying out some of these in explicit terms of like, okay, if your bugs, accessibility is taken care of, responsibility is taken care of, you know, that aspect also helps them because it's like, oh, one less thing I need to worry about.
Absolutely. So I think when we spoke, you mentioned something about measuring as well. Like, how have you guys kind of seen measuring the value and showcasing that?
Yeah, so we really concentrate, I think, on first, like you said, monetary is a big one from a business point of view. And I honestly think most businesses will fund design systems, and the number one cause is because they want it to create efficiency, and they want it to save on design and development hours, because they see the same thing getting repeated over and over again. I think what we try and do is exactly the same thing. We costed up how much does it cost us to make, just in really explicit terms, small, medium and large and extra large components. And we kind of use the word component because people understand component, even if it's kind of utility classes and other abstract behaviors. We measured how much it would cost us to make as a business, as a design system team. And then we worked with each of the teams to do surveys. We started out with lots of research to find out, well, how much does it cost another team to make? And we figured out, look, in basic terms, if they used all the features over a period of time, let's say it costs us the same amount of time. So let's say it costs us 10K to make a component. If you use that component 10 times, then that's £1 million pounds. And then you take away the number and you figure out how much you do. But I think from a product management point of view, obviously when you're talking to leadership, they like these big numbers because they can see the big picture. But when you're talking to an individual product owner about his or her project, they're not going to care about the big numbers. But what we did is we kind of flipped it and said, well, this is how much money, here's the metrics for you, this is how much you're saving the business by using the design system. Then often our product owners will take these metrics, they'll put them as part of their OKRs, and then they'll play it back to their bosses and say, hey, look, I've saved this much by collaborating with the design system team. And I felt that was a big flip as well.
And I think you also had an idea about how measuring that we also discussed.
Yeah, no, we did. What's interesting to me is that, like, in both my big design system experiences, I've tried the measuring thing and it didn't actually work. So this is anecdotal because I think that your methods are the sound ones, and this is probably where I wish that I had a product person who could actually do the business case and crunch all those numbers. I can't. It's really not my strength. But I did work with finance, with a very interested person from finance who was really trying to help. And I did the thing where we calculated like how much it is to reuse a component versus rebuild a component, etc., etc. And he crunched all the numbers, and at the end of the day, he told me the return of I can't justify the return of investment still, not in numbers. It's obvious that this is the right thing to do, but I still can't make it a number big enough that it would move the needle with leadership. So at the end of the day, I still had to just talk to leadership about the concept itself of a design system. Like, why would you want 4 teams redoing the same thing and wasting time? And they got that. So, but we had to sneak it into a business case for something else. It couldn't stand up on its own.
Yeah.
It baffled me. And in the past, this was the most recent, but in the past, I even had a senior, like a VP of product, looking at me and telling me that saving makes sense, but it's way too small. So on paper, I never managed to make the numbers look good enough. But it means that I had to rely on selling the vision to people. And I mean, maybe it got some enthusiastic people that are very happy to participate in this magical thing, which will help all the teams. There's something good in that too, I guess.
I mean,
absolutely.
yeah, sorry, go on.
No, absolutely. I think that, and the bigger picture is the vision and what it does to the client experience and how it improves that. That's really the big sell. I think I did feel like for about 4 months I became an accountant, like a design accountant, where I'm just sitting in spreadsheets and I'm going. And there was one moment I was like, shit, this whole design system thing doesn't make any sense. And then I went back to the numbers. I was like, oh, I forgot to do this and add this, and oh yeah, okay, phew, But it's really interesting. But when you really get into it, you start thinking, okay, but it's the creation of something that these 10 teams aren't doing. It's then the maintenance. How much is the maintenance of doing it? If you work with design leaders and tech, and I bring in design costs, dev costs, and then I say, okay, what about feature growth? So you've saved on the button the first time this website used it 3 years ago. But what about all the features we've added? Could we add a percentage for features? And I think as long as you're working with leadership and they're really happy with the numbers and the calculations you're making, you'd be surprised how much it's just purely, like you said, once instead of 4 times. If you can make those numbers work, like that really sells. From an efficiency point of view anyway, it makes a big difference.
And I think there's exploration as well. Like you can do a lot more exploration a lot quicker as well. So there are, but you're right, business want numbers and that can be challenging. And then we sort of need to sell that vision. And I actually think that product can play quite instrumental part in selling that vision. But we kind of need to sell it to them first. And I like what you're saying. You say you become an accountant. So I feel like as design system people, we have for a long time trying to get a place at the table, and to do that we need to know business. And now you're telling me that we also need to know accountancy. So great, I'm looking forward to that. So it's new skills coming up. So how do we get that sort of organizational buying and embedding the design system at scale? So we sort of established that we need to get people on board with it. We need to do senior leadership. If we can't do the money, can we only rely on the vision, or what else can we utilize? What else do we have in our arsenal and toolkit, or are we doomed? Do we all need to become accountants? Because
accountancy does help. Yeah, accountancy does help. I think it is the vision. I guess a design system is doing 2 things. It's either creating efficiency in all different ways. You can think of all new ways that creates efficiency, or it increases quality, which I would put consistency and brand and everything. It's really doing, I think, those 2 things. It's saving the business money, speeding things up, it's efficiency. Then it is improving the client experience, and then creating things like client retention and added sales and all of those things. I think focusing on the value and telling that story is really what leaders care about. The fact that your design system is making the business money in some way, or it's saving money and it's adding value.
I think another thing I would add to that would be having the right marketing internally for your team. And I think this is kind of where they probably need to hear the same story in terms of the narrative around it, but from many, many different people. It can't just be design system. You need to have those people who have bought into it also speaking up for you. So you need to have your allies, so to say, in different disciplines as well. So if designers and engineers are bought into it because they see the value day in, day out, you have representatives from their side who can speak up in different forums. So like Mike was talking about earlier, how our staff engineers Mike is our engineering manager, by the way. He was talking about how our staff engineers are really pushing for design system to be like, okay, ours is called Fable first for every new experience that we have to build. Having that voice massively helps. So I think it's just like selling the vision, having that story repeatable, often from several points, that helps concrete it. Because otherwise it's kind of like one of those things that gets forgotten and you're the only voice in the room who's constantly repeating it.
I agree with that, because it has to become normality. It has to become something that you don't need to sell anymore because it's obvious. Or you can also use the reverse psychology. I've done it a few times where I'm like, okay, sure, build your own thing from scratch.
Oh, I love that try. Let's give that a try as well. I love that. So if we bring this back to kind of like how do we invite products? So as a product person, I'm looking at you now. Do you find that it has helped you to have discussions with product people because you are a product person? Like, do you get more, I don't want to necessarily use the word respect, but do you vibe better with them because you're a product person?
It definitely helps in the sense that you are in the same groups of conversations when you're talking about what's coming up next in your work. You're there as part of those conversations, and it just really helps to be able to say, oh, and this is what we've got on the roadmap, and they're like, oh, design systems has so and so thing on the roadmap, and you're explaining in terms of like this will help you deliver that thing. So again, it's just that exposure. Hearing that often from the point of how is this going to be useful to me from a product person point of view, I think that becomes useful. And they're not hearing about it in some other event that only design system has organized. It is part of their everyday conversation, as every product team, anytime a big product team of like product managers get together, you're talking about it. It helps a lot.
Fair. I'm going to come back to a second. So there's a QR code behind me, and I would normally encourage you to put your questions in there. I'm not trying to check my phone. I'm trying to get this slide up, but I have no internet here, so I am totally blind. I can't see your questions, and therefore I'm going to put you in a lovely position that if you have questions, you're going to have to ask them live. Isn't that wonderful? That's the perfect thing about being in person. You get to actually ask your questions live. So hold tight to those questions. We're going to come to those in a second. But yes, when you and I talked, we talked about language, and you said something which I thought was quite interesting. Product people doesn't necessarily care about the nitty-gritty of the pixels, etc., etc. Like, are we not using the right language? What do we do to...
Yeah, I mean, I guess the natural thing is you want to invite product people, so you'll invite them to a design conversation or a development conversation. Then you're going to talk about like pixel spacing or design tokens or whatever. And straight away, they're really busy. They need to get stuff done, and they are too busy for this conversation, and it will just seem too granular and grainy. But I think when I speak to product owners, you know, even little one-to-ones, getting to know them, like empathy, like you said, I think so key. So what's keeping you up? And I really got to put this thing live. Okay, we can give you this, and you can use this. I think often they'll think about things in features. You know, like, oh, this is a new feature. We're launching this new podcast player. Oh, well, I need that. Or often, I think what you'll find is people will think of your community's roadmaps almost like read only. You know, these are the roadmaps, and we need to feed those roadmaps. But often, as soon as you start speaking to them about what your roadmap is, then the roadmaps are really kind of fungible, because you can be like, oh, well, we'll launch a new filtering system in 3 months' time. Oh, wow, filtering. You know, we'd love to do filtering. We didn't think we'd do it this year, but if you're doing filtering, then we can move things forward. Like, often things are very arbitrary. So I like having that conversation one-on-one with POs and just saying, what are you trying to do for the next 3 months? And then we also have like really detailed planning. We have like really scaled, integrated planning that we do, and all sorts of things. But I do think one-on-one talking is really, really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, if I start talking about design tokens, I'll hear snoring in a second. Like, there's no way I'll hold a product person's attention if I start talking anything close to that level of depth.
Fair enough.
That's totally fair, but yeah, no, you said something that I really want to stress, because I know I talked a lot about how you need the leadership buy-in, but it's both sides at the PO level. Like I had a conversation this morning where I just basically invited a PO to like look into our Geo, and she found tickets that, to be honest, we had forgotten that they were even there because we put them there last year. She found them, and I was like, oh, I forgot that. We had a bit of a laugh. She started getting a bit involved in how we work, and that was just that started a common language, or like same as when I talk to individual developers, and they love the idea of the design system, and then they will advocate for it with their own teams, and they will bring product people along, because product will at the very least trust their own engineers. So it's back also to what you were saying about having many allies.
Yeah.
And also I would say we talked about them as allies, almost like we're the pusher for design systems, but really design system is just something that makes sense. Everyone should do it. Why is it always on us to put
We need that t-shirt. Design system, it just makes sense. I love that. Actually, talking about that, so you mentioned in our conversation about almost piggybacking on engineering. So we know that product and engineers has been getting on well for a long time. So obviously, because everybody, they're just natural, yeah? Designers, we get on with everyone because we're just friendly, charming people. But you were talking about almost piggybacking on the engineering to sort of entice the product conversation. Tell me more about that.
So, at least at Sainsbury's, one of the things that I've come across is around how some of the stuff is built on legacy systems, and it means that there needs to be some sort of migration or re-platforming to happen to be able to integrate with some of the work we do. Now, something like that would be considered tech debt. And at that moment in time, you kind of need the engineering manager or whoever is the engineering team to be able to kind of like support with the whole idea of like, as part of that, by the way, can we integrate with the design system? So that kind of support, I think that voice would come in a bit more strongly if there is that engineering support along the way. And also at Sainsbury's, we have a tech authority who does talk about, I think I mentioned it earlier in our conversation, who talks about if you're building anything new, use this frameworks, these tech stacks and this. I think having that as well massively helps. So having that engineering buy-in, because like before product was anywhere part of the conversation, engineering and design were kind of leading that, and a lot of the support was kind of like done from an engineering point of view as well, to be able to penetrate into the organization and get it using. So yeah, it definitely helps to have that kind of engineering support to be able to push some of these things. Because product managers look to, when it's a tech debt, they're kind of looking at engineering managers to help them understand, is it worthwhile investing into? And that's probably where they'd be able to kind of support you more.
That's where all your savings come from as well. Like tech, on average, you'll have at least 4 devs for one designer. If you're thinking about all the devs that are related to it, some companies are way more than that. Some companies are less. Definitely. So then if they're closer to product, and that's where all your numbers, if we're going back to numbers, are going to come from. Is the tech. It's not the design savings, because design will spend their time on other interesting things. Like research and all the good things we need to be doing.
Important thing, not just interesting. Yeah? No. Important. Very, very important point to stress
important that. Things.
Yes, absolutely. Great. So I think the kind of piggybacking in engineering, I think that's really interesting. So you basically what I'm hearing here is that, first of all, we need to get, which we already know, we need to get business leadership buy-in. Then we need to get business leadership to support us to also make it a solid understanding to everybody across the business that the design system is happening. And I'm talking from experience myself here, because I see where we end up struggling, and it's because the people that we're coming to, whether they are product people or whether they are actually even brand people or marketing people, if they haven't been told that the design system is happening, they're not very open to it. But if it comes from above, well, I say from above, well, if it comes from above, if it's come from top down rather than us trying to say that this is happening, then that is really helpful. So we need to find that way to get that conversation happening. We need to ensure that when we do the conversation, we invite product people early on. That's for me, any design system job project that I've always been on is, one of the questions that I always ask is, who have you not invited to this kickoff call or to this kickoff conversation? Tell me who you think. And they're like, no, everyone's invited. And then we kind of go like, okay, where are the product owners? Where are the brand people? Where are the marketing people? Where anyone who's going to be somehow impacted by this design system, if they are not invited to the kickoff. And I also think that just because you're invited to a kickoff call doesn't mean that you're going to be deep into the project. But it gives people, oh, they thought about me, they included me. And then you know that this is happening. And then it's up to that person to say, what happened with that design system? Or it's up to you as a design system team to say, you don't need to do anything now. We come back to you when we need you, but now you know we exist. So I think that's sort of like get the buy-in from the business, get the business to ensure that they tell everyone that this is happening, and make sure that you invite everyone from the beginning. And then what you guys are talking about, which I absolutely love, speak the right language. We said this in the past when we're talking about design, having a seat at the business table. We need to learn how to speak business. But we probably also need to learn how to speak product and learn how to speak brand. We need to know who we're speaking to. And actually, there's absolutely no excuse looking at all the designers in this room. There is no excuse because we do user research all the time and we pride ourselves on how good we are at talking with different people and understanding how to get information out of them. So utilize that skill when we're talking to product. Anything else? Have I covered most things there?
Yeah, I would just add one tiny
Go
thing.
for it.
We know that design systems are obvious. It's as obvious as microservices for most platforms.
Yeah.
So we should just start acting as if they're obvious. It will always start from design or engineering because we're the subject matter experts. But we shouldn't have to, like in an ideal world, we would have a company come in to us and say, can you please build a design system so this can be more expedient? I think that sometimes, and this is especially in UX, sometimes we feel like we have to earn the seat at the table, and that this is a thing that will make our life easier, and we think it's just, and it's a project we're passionate about, therefore we need to sell it to others, we need to put in all of this work and all of this energy in convincing the company that they should drink water and sleep 8 hours.
True.
Like there's a point in which like the way we act should be, this is obvious, it's dumb that it doesn't exist already, so let's fix it together.
Yeah, and I think you touched a little bit on that earlier when you're looking at like services, yeah? So design system is almost like a service, and so I think you mentioned people first, like design system first. Like if you're starting something, make sure that design system is part of that process. There is no question on whether it should be or not. You start with a design system in the same way that you would start with any other service, whether it's an engineering tool or whether it's a product tool, or then design system should be part of that. That's kind of touching a little bit on that, I guess.
Yeah, you have backend systems all the time. Like there are dependencies with other teams all the time, and it is just a fact.
Yeah.
It's just how you build products. And
Yeah.
design systems could be an infrastructure, can be an enabler, very much in the same way.
So I'm going to throw it out to see, because I can't see the QR code, so you can tell me and say, yeah, I put loads of questions in there. I wouldn't know because I can't see it. Do we have any questions from the audience or comments? Well, I welcome comments, and do you know what? I'll even take a clapback if you have it. Yes.
Hi. I'd like to ask...
Can we hear this gentleman, or do we have a
I'll
microphone?
speak one.
Yes, go for it.
I'd like to ask for each of the panelists... Oh, thanks. Each of the panelists' relative improvements since investing in design systems. Like, what are the relative, efficiencies that have been gained in your experience? And I guess it could be approximate. I'm not putting you on the spot. But and also, like, where those efficiencies have been gained in reference to the whole process of product and the delivery, like quarterly basis.
Well,
Where do we start? Go for it. I'm going to have to time box your answers there, because this is a presentation in itself, and I love that. Go for it.
My current design system has not been live long enough that I can answer all of those questions, but within designs, we've definitely seen how much faster it is to just set up a project from scratch, a new feature, and so on. Our designers are also a lot less stressed. and it's a lot easier to maintain like the visual consistency that is required. So at least within design we're happy. Give us 6 months to a year and maybe someone else will be happy too.
Can you repeat your question, please?
I'm looking for quantifiably somewhat. And qualitatively is good, but for quantifiably, like the efficiencies which have been gained within your business since introducing a design system, and where, as a process of product delivery, those efficiencies have been observed.
Our design system is very old. So it's been around, what, 7 years, Mike? Yeah? 6, 7 years nearly. So it's hard to kind of go before and after quite that duration because a lot would have changed generally in the landscape by then. But what we have noticed is when a new experience is being spun up, there is a big difference between when they use our design system and how quickly they go in terms of going live versus if they weren't. And I think we have a few case studies within ours to be able to go, oh, this particular experience, there is one of our experiences which gathered a lot of limelight from senior stakeholders. It went live really fast, and it was all our design system first, so that becomes a case study of how we talk about it. I can't give you the exact numbers or the details, but things like that have helped us talk about the efficiency side of things.
Yeah, I guess we've got, two levels to it. There's a lot of content, especially content and marketing experiences that just go out now with no development, where I think there would have been huge development teams related to them previously, and now it's all just content. And they're still playing catch up because there's so many features in the design system now that they've got so much to play with. And then we've got a lot of large projects really in the last 18 months that have launched super quickly because the designers aren't working on buttons anymore and the developers aren't working on buttons. They're all of this content, and then we're working alongside them on any new features. But I remember there was a really big project, really high budget for what it was. It was a short kind of stint of about 8 weeks, but it was a really huge team working large research, etc. But when it got to development, they did it in like less than 48 hours because of all the interaction patterns that were available. All the time was spent on research and user testing and design, etc. And then the problem was the leaders after that got the impression that you could launch something like that in like 48 hours. So that kind of,
The pressure.
it was difficult for the team. But yeah, I think it just proving it out. When we start to see changes in design and development where you have less kind of UI designers needed and more people that are kind of, there would naturally be product designers that are kind of doing a lot of UI. They're not doing the UI anymore. They're doing the research and they're doing kind of much more expansive roles. And then same thing for developers. They're not doing the buttons over and over and over again. They now don't have to do any of that stuff, so they're doing other things.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions, comments? Yes, absolutely.
Hi, thanks so much for this discussion. Super interesting. But what I found most interesting was that kind of like the relationship that you all were kind of almost saying as you know, normal in that between product as something, as if like product was something completely separate from design and engineering. So I work in a scale up, and I'm very lucky that design always has a place at the table, always has a place with leadership. We never have to justify why we need a design system. The entire business gets it. So I think for people who are not in this position, what would you suggest to kind of equalize that relationship so that that's not the kind of like product as parent, design and engineering as children, or like design and engineering not having a place at that decision-making table?
Who wants to pick this up?
I'd love to, but I would use swear words.
I was very clear of introduction. Keep your language clean. So,
It's a beautiful question.
no, I think it's a great question. And yeah, sorry, anyone else before I rant up? So just so I understand it correctly, how do we ensure that there is a equal hierarchy? There is a level between, yeah. So first of all, I have a very strong opinion about this whole thing. I'm going to start by talking the name design system. I think the problem for me starts there. The problem started that it's called design system. It's an unfortunate thing that it ended up being design system because it ultimately means that it took a long time before engineers were interested because it's got a word design in it. And eventually when they realized actually it's really useful for all of us, so now they're on board, so all of a sudden designers and engineers are equal. Product is probably looking at it a little bit in the same way, kind of like, oh, it's got design in it, so okay, there's something. So one thing is just wording and language, I would say. The other thing is also that for me, product, regardless whether we talk about engineering or we're talking about product or we're talking about designers or business analysis or whatever your back end, front end, at the end of the day, we all product. We're all building the same product. And for me, I think that's a good starting point to get to what you're talking about. How do we need to be better at getting everyone to understand that we are not actually factions of product versus design. And I appreciate that I'm using that language up here, let's invite product. We are actually just all of us trying to build the same product. And whether you are a business analyst or whether you are a researcher or whether you are a UI designer, all our goal is the same. We just want this product to be successful. So I think if we can get to, well, it's starting to sound a bit like, oh, we all got to love each other, but we all got to respect each other. And I think that's, for me, is a good starting point. And that's why I want to invite everyone, regardless of who they are. If they're going to get impacted by whatever it is we're doing next, they should be part of that conversation. And then you become equal, because everyone has the same investment from the beginning. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think for me, it's about that equal respect and investment. No, and I didn't even use any foul words.
You're better than me.
Anything else? What's your take?
I think we mentioned empathy earlier. I think what's in the control of a designer or a developer in that situation is really empathizing and trying to kind of build a bond with the product owner that they're working with. I guess from an org point of view, the kind of dynamic has to be set in the way that the teams are structured and the organization is structured, because if it is hierarchical and it's kind of products and then design and developer are all just about delivery, then I think it's really difficult. But I guess every company is different. You're in a position, I would just start with empathy and trying to connect and understand the other person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is very much dependent on the organization, the roles that are played just within product design and engineering. I've worked in companies where they're at equal footing. I've worked in places where something is a bit more, one discipline is dominating, so to say. So it really, it's a hard one to kind of answer, because it's like, it depends on how the organizational structure is and what you're paying attention to, or like how it kind of started off, sometimes it's like the founder is a designer, so now the designer has a seat at the table and there is like VP of design. But sometimes it's not. It kind of is really nuanced, I think. But in general, it just comes down to that of like, each discipline has a role, and whether it's product vision or strategy, you need input from all the teams in order to actually enable any work that's happening. So it's just kind of like being conscious of that. At least that's what the product should be thinking at any given point, of like equal partners. If you don't have that understanding and that representation, you're missing a huge opportunity.
Excellent.
I thought of something that doesn't have swear words.
Oh, great. Please share.
I love what you said about empathy, and usually that's my line, because empathy is the foundation of it. Like I was saying earlier, the product people that freak out at the risks and dependency, it's because they're accountable, so they're reasonably stressed, and all of that is true. At the same time, I am a big believer of, you also need to keep an eye on your self-worth and on not burning out, because like you were saying, companies will be companies. The way they're set up, whether or not they think the design should be at the table, sometimes you can influence that, sometimes you can't, and you may burn yourself out if you try. So just keep an eye on like your own health and the effort that you put in, because ultimately design should be an equal seat at the table with product, with tech, and with everything else. And if it's not, I mean, it's not like we should beg. It's in the company's interest to have it.
One small point I wanted to add.
Go for it.
I think if we think of the dynamic, and you mentioned the business, that's a really good way to talk about it. Because if you think about the kind of triad, you've got designers, developers, and often the product is the business. The product has that kind of, they're the home team, they're the representing the business. So I think sometimes that puts them in a position of power.
Yeah, true.
Something like in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, because I think that kind of gives product almost the business ears, like, so that's, I agree. Do we have any other comments or questions? Yes, we have one at the back over there.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so at our organization, thanks. Yeah, so at our organization, we went for a kind of we started a bottom-up approach with the design system, as you usually do, kind of get the designers, engineers on board. And then we kind of encountered a lot of resistance when it came to product, because we went for a federated, or semi-federated system, where we had engineers having to contribute for the upfront investment from their teams. So we eventually just decided to kind of sidestep product because it's too difficult, or got too difficult, and we went straight to leadership, right? And that was good. Well, in one way it was good because we got really good, like strong buy-in from leadership and big investment. However, now it's come kind of full circle and bit us in the back a little bit, where the product feel a bit cornered, I would say, right? Because you kind of have the engineers and designers on board and the leadership, but they're not fully there. So, I think one part of it I can definitely see is it feels like to them probably that it's kind of like this mandated thing that they have to, give investment or part of their engineering resources to, and that's going to slow them down for a certain amount of time. So I think my question is to you, how can we, we talked about empathy, but how can we approach this conversation with product, being in the difficult position we're already in, to make them feel like, to make them feel a bit more welcoming about the system? I know it's a difficult one because we've kind of cornered them a little bit, but yeah, that's essentially my question.
I guess the question then would be, what exactly is the concern that the product discipline is showing? Because a lot of the times it comes down to, how do I fit that in my roadmap? Because if I put that in, something else gives.
Yeah.
And then they are accountable to their senior stakeholders to say, why couldn't we deliver that X thing, whichever one that you booted out of your roadmap, because you need to fit design systems in. But if the senior leadership is bought in, then it's easier to explain. It's like, oh, you guys also wanted us to do this, so that means that this particular feature will have to stay for a little longer, wait for a little longer, because we need to integrate this.
I guess it's more sentiment is what I'm talking about. Yes. So the internal look for the design system from their perspective is quite a negative one, but for the rest of the organisation it's quite positive.
So it feels like a coup.
A little bit.
A little bit. Like, oh, you sidestepped me and now we are forced with this.
Yes.
I would say there was one side in which time heals things, like let things boil over, and eventually it will just be so obvious that everyone will forget, or not. The approach that I tend to prefer is go one-on-one level with people, not in group settings where they will feel like they have something to maintain and uphold and a certain image that they can sustain. Just go one-on-one level, rebuild that trust. If they want to throw their toys on the pram still, well, we tried, but yeah, one-on-one is usually better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's like if the sentiment's there, you've just got to kind of let it out. You've got to be with them, speak to them, and let them, like give it to you. Let them punch it out.
Yeah.
I agree. Just talk it through. Yeah, because they're going to have all this kind of resentment, and like you said, it's beyond the kind of capacity issues and stuff you could work out. It's just going to be something really abstract and unrational. So I think it's just about talking it through. Yeah, and just draining it really. Yeah.
I don't know if you're a designer or an engineer.
I'm a designer.
Okay, so I would go back to that what we talked about empathy. So, and I would kind of lean on that design approach when you try to understand the user and you sit down with them and you try to understand what are your pain points, what are your problems, what are your concerns. And I agree with you guys. It's a one-to-one conversation. You just got to hear them out. It's you put your therapy hat on and you say, do you know what? Talk to me about this.
Because we're also therapists now.
Yeah. So we got accountants, business, and therapists. Yeah.
Thank you.
And it is kind of just like, talk to me about this. What are your concerns? Why is this worrying you? And then try to work out through good conversation on how you cross that bridge. I did see an arm going up here. Yes, let's take this one as well. Yes, go for it. Absolutely. It's on its way.
Sorry, just one person.
Christine is getting a good exercise. Sorry, Christine.
It sort of builds on the last thing that you just said. There was obviously a joke about being therapists and accountants and stuff. Aren't design systems set up to fail?
Yeah.
In the sense of, like, it's actually testament, Benny, to what you said earlier, is the fact that they're actually successful in spite of everything that we've talked about. And let's be honest, this isn't the first conference or panel talk that I've been to where people have talked about adoption,
Absolutely.
buy-in, relationships with product. Are we in a situation where we're actually an externalized product team, which in any other format would have customer support, would have customer relationship management, would have marketing teams, would have all of the other things that you expect from a product startup that gets integrated into a small startup or an enterprise. But we give that responsibility to a designer and engineer who, let's be honest, didn't
Ask for it.
train for it.
No, I agree.
And so one of the things I look at is, are we even going about this in fundamentally the wrong model? And that is a very open and broad question, but it's something I think about every day.
I think that, I don't know about you guys, but I'm hearing a talk at the Future DSL being brewed up right
I
now.
have no answers, hence the question.
Fair, touche.
I 100% agree with you. It's kind of what I was trying to hint with earlier, where it's like, in an ideal world, we shouldn't be the ones that, like, maybe we propose it as an idea, but it should be the company that wants it. It shouldn't be on us to having to push it, having to convince people that this is the right thing, and then having to work extra to make it work and prove that it works and convince them and come and look, like, see, it worked, I was right. It's dumb. It's like we work the same amount of time as everyone else does, but we're asked to do 4 jobs. It is not fair and it doesn't work. I think it's just, I mean, we can go on a rant later about where I think the product design is generally at right now. It's not great. But I do agree with you. I think, though, that in places where at least leadership has a good understanding of the pros and cons and on the need to reuse and not recreate, it could be smoother. And we've seen it with technology. Technology is ahead of design in that sense. Their organizations are more mature in technology. So there is hope that they will become mature in terms of design as well. Like right now, most startups will build using microservices without even thinking about it. One day they will also build design systems in a proper structure. Maybe, if we get to that, if we don't get tired first.
Any quick comments from either of you?
It is very much like having a startup within a large organization, isn't it? It really is, but it's just that that's never how it actually begins, and that's the point that you're trying to kind of like illustrate, right? So, yeah, I mean, if you were to kind of take on a design systems one, really have to think about it as a product. Unfortunately, it's not just customers who are willing to buy, it's the ones who really don't want to buy, and you need to convince them to buy. So that's a different challenge altogether. Like, how many products we go out into the market with, like, no product market fit, but we are going to make it fit. That doesn't often happen, right? Like,
Yeah.
but it is one of those unfortunate situations for some reason. But yeah, hopefully, over time, it becomes the norm, and then you're not having to kind of fight for it every time.
I would say design systems are really cool. And we love them. And we're here because we love them, but they are really hard.
They are.
And like to do something you love, you also have to do all of this stuff. You know, like you want to fix the roof, you've got to fix everything to fix the roof first. We've got this kind of blueprint in our design system, and we've got like all the way from input in and planning through to like advocacy and literally client support, because we do need support. We have a whole, since January, we kind of broke off one of the groups to a squad, and it's called Community Enablement, and we focused that completely on the infrastructure, the platforms, the tickets, the questions, because we needed that level of focus, because you get to that point where it's not just all about starting the design system, it's now about everyone's dependent on it. So it's about keeping up with all of the questions. But yeah, it's tough. It's totally different from a normal product that's rolling out. And sometimes it's wrong to judge it as just another product team. I think it's a completely different.
Yeah, I would say it's the same. Like, it's not necessarily just a separate product team, it's a service team. And I think what is important for anybody about to start a design system or thinking that their organization should do it, first of all, go for it. But before you do, which I often talk about to people when we start that design system journey together, are you fully understanding what it is that you're taking on? And often the answer is no. So then your job becomes to explain that to people and be very clear and keep on repeating what it is they're taking on. And I'm not even talking about the stuff that we're talking about here. I'm talking about exactly what you're saying. Like, you are building something which is going to sit with your business for a long time, and it's going to end up being a service. And if you just think components, you are failing. You're going to 100% fail, because there's a whole other bunch of things that you need to think about. And some of those things you may not have asked for. See what I did there? I would love to continue, and we are going to continue. We're going to continue through those doors and do the drinks and stuff, because unfortunately I have to wrap up here. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to come to me directly. These guys are around as well. Chat to each other. But yeah, I want to thank you so much for joining me. And thank you guys for your questions.